The Silent Base 802 from Be Quiet's a pretty versatile case, allowing users to choose between different configurations that are optimized for either silence or airflow. The standard version that we're looking at in this video retails for about $160, but there's another version that has a tempered glass side panel that'll run you about $170, and both of these versions are available in black and white. So let's see what the Silent Base 802 can offer system builders. The first thing that I recommend doing is installing the legs that come separately in the box. The case doesn't need them to stand up, but if you don't use them, there's going to be a huge reduction in airflow through the bottom where your power supply is going to be. And it's just easier to install them now in the beginning than later on when you've got hardware in there and everything weighs a ton. The case is made from a combination of steel and plastic, and it feels durable and well made, which is something that I've learned to expect from Be Quiet. In the stock configuration, it comes with a solid front panel, but it also ships with a mesh panel. Swapping the panels is easy and doesn't require any tools, and it's worth noting that the solid panel has some sound dampening foam on the back. So if you choose to use the mesh panel, you'll be giving up that sound suppression, so there's a little bit of a trade-off there. The front's fitted with a removable dust filter and two 140mm Pure Wings 2 fans, and there's also enough space to fit a third 140mm fan as well. The I/O panel's on the top, and it includes two USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports, HDD activity LED, reset button, a huge power button, headphone and mic jacks, a single USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port, and a fan controller switch. Side panels are totally tool-free and can be removed simply by pressing a little button on the back of the case, and the inside of both panels are covered with some sound dampening foam. The entire top section's removable just by taking out a few screws, but you wouldn't really ever need to do that because they included a removable tray that slides right out where you can easily mount your fans and radiators. This is a really convenient feature to have when you get into the installation process. It saved me a ton of time when I was trying to get my hardware in the case. The top panel has a swappable plate just like the front, where you can choose between a stock solid panel with sound suppression or a mesh design for optimal airflow. The rear has a 140mm Pure Wings 2 fan, an I/O shield cutout, 7 PCI-E slots and 2 additional slots in a vertical orientation, and a removable power supply bracket. And underneath you'll find a single continuous dust filter that's removable for easy cleaning. The case supports motherboards all the way up to eATX, which means you can pretty much fit anything in here except the largest server boards that are out there. And the motherboard tray is detachable and can be set up in an inverted orientation. That's not something that I would do, but the option's there if you want it. It's really versatile when it comes to cooling as well, with room for radiators up to 420mm or 3 140 or 120mm fans in the front, radiators up to 360mm or 3 140 or 120mm fans in the top, and 140mm radiators or a single 140 or 120mm fan in the back. And for air coolers, you can fit units with a max height of 185mm. The entire bottom section's covered by a continuous power supply shroud that's going to help keep things looking neat and clean. There's some removable panels up top to allow bigger radiators to fit in the front of the case, and also an additional mount for a 120 or 140mm fan. Behind the motherboard tray, there's space for 3 2.5-inch drives and a removable hard drive cage that'll fit 2 3.5-inch or 4 2.5-inch drives. And there's optional spaces for an additional 5 3.5-inch or 10 2.5-inch drives, bringing the total drive capacity of the case to a massive 15 2.5-inch bays and 7 3.5-inch. And that makes this case an awesome option for high-end video editing or other production-focused system builds. Now, unfortunately, Be Quiet chose to ship the case with only one additional drive cage. So if you plan to fill up all the bays, you're going to need to order more separately, and that means you're going to have to spend some more money if you want to use the case to its full potential when it comes to storage. Power supplies will fit in the bottom up to 288mm in length, and there seems to be lots of cable tie-down points and routing options, including a large space above the motherboard tray and some smaller cutouts near the bottom. And you can also see the included fan controller back here as well, with capacity for up to 6 fans. Installing hardware was fairly easy because there's lots of space available to work with. The only real tight spot is behind the motherboard tray, where I think even just a few extra millimeters of space would help with cable management quite a bit. I installed 5 hard drives into the case and covered the additional bays with these little plastic covers that Be Quiet for some reason only ships with the window version of the case. I happen to have a few of these things kicking around from other Be Quiet cases that I've reviewed in the past, so that's how I was able to include them in my system build with the standard version of the Silent Base 802. So just keep that in mind that you're not going to get them if you buy this version of the case. They only come with the windowed version. And that's unfortunate because these things are actually really cool. They help make the case look a lot more clean by filling up the drive bays that you're not using, but the back side of them have some channels and some grooves that can help route cables and help you manage everything back there a little bit easier. To test the performance, I exported a 4K video project that takes about 15 minutes to render. And I ran the system, which includes a Ryzen 9 3950X processor and a GTX 1080 Ti GPU in both the airflow and silent configurations. The results are pretty interesting because the silent configuration actually managed to produce just a little bit more noise, and that's because of the restricted airflow, which raised the CPU temperature enough to force the 360mm AIO to ramp up to nearly full speed, which produced significantly more noise and overshadowed the benefits of the noise suppression. Now keep in mind, the results are only like this because of the particular AIO that I'm using, which in this case happens to be an NZXT Kraken X63, which produces an obscene amount of noise when it ramps up to full power. So if you had a quieter cooler in here, whether that be an AIO or just an air tower cooler, the results would be completely different, where the silent configuration should be producing much less noise, or at least a little bit less noise, than the airflow configuration. Now let's talk pros and cons. On the positive side, we've got that removable radiator tray at the top that helps with hardware installation. There's huge versatility for cooling, a spacious interior, loads of drive bays, and good airflow and acoustical properties with optional panels. As far as I'm concerned, the only real negative here is that they chose to leave stuff out. They don't give you the extra drive cages, and they don't give you the drive bay covers unless you buy the version with the window. And that's unfortunate because it means you can't use this otherwise amazing case to its full potential unless you spend extra money and wait for those items to be delivered to you. To be fair, they were probably leaving them out to keep the cost down because not everybody needs like a million drives in their system. So I'll give them that, and I suppose I understand. And if there were a neutral category, that's where I'd put the price. It's not so low that it's a pro, but it's also not so high that it's a con. It's somewhere in the middle. You're getting a lot of case for the money. It's a really good case. It's got a ton of features, and it's really good for high-end system builds. So I'm gonna have the purchasing links and even more information down in the description if you wanna check that stuff out. And leave us a comment and tell everybody what you think about the Silent Base 802. And get subscribed so you don't miss any upcoming content.